If you are hearing this, then you must wish to understand the storm. Not the thunder, not the hammer, not the battles carved into legend. Who I was before the crown, before the crusades, before the weight of a dying world fell upon my shoulders. My name is Thor, son of Odin, heir to Asgard, wielder of Mjolnir. But before, if you enjoy drifting into the lives of heroes and want to hear more stories like mine from others across the realms and beyond, consider subscribing. There are many voices still waiting to speak, and this is only the beginning. Now, let me tell you mine. I was not always a god in the way the stories say. Once, I was only a boy, with golden hair, curious eyes and a heart far louder than my voice. I was born beneath the crack of lightning, so the poets say. In truth, I remember little of that time, only warmth, arms, voices that spoke of greatness, long before I understood what greatness truly cost. My mother Frigga was the first to hold me. She was not made of war or fury as father was. She carried magic in her hands and moonlight in her eyes. She would sing to me in the tongue of the stars soft, ancient words meant to calm newborn gods. I remember her scent more than her song, lavender, silver, and a quiet kind of sorrow she never spoke of. Perhaps even then, she knew how heavy my future would be. Odin was a presence more than a man in those early years. The All-Father, crowned in gold, robed in prophecy. He did not speak often, but when he did, his voice echoed across every wall in the palace and every bone in my chest. He named me Prince, not because I earned it, but because I was born to it, and I believed for many years that this was enough. Asgard was my playground, the golden city that floated above the realms like a dream, marble halls that stretched into the clouds, banners that rippled in winds I once thought divine, guards that bowed when I passed, even when I did not know why. It was a kingdom built on ancient conquest, but to a child it was merely home, and I was not alone. Loki, my brother not by blood but by bond, he was quieter than I was, sharper, always thinking, always watching. He learned magic while I learned to swing wooden swords, and though he rarely struck first, his tongue was a blade far keener than mine. We were close then, before the lies, before the secrets, before the throne became something we both wanted for very different reasons. We would sneak into the vaults, he and I. Remember one night, barely past midnight, we found Gungnir, father's spear resting in its cradle. It pulsed with quiet power, humming through the stone floor. I reached for it, bold as ever. Loki just watched me, said nothing. Later I would realize, that was his way of testing me. He always wanted to see how far I'd go. My earliest lessons were in combat. Sif, the warriors 3. They were not yet warriors then, only children. Like me, we trained with dull blades and wooden shields, but every swing felt like a promise, a future forged in valor. I thought courage was found in how loudly you charged, how hard you struck, how many enemies fell before you, but courage is quieter than that. I would not learn that for a long time. I was praised quickly, too quickly. Father's eyes gleamed with pride when I struck down my first opponent in the sparring yard. He called me his hammer before the hammer, and I believed him. I believed that power made purpose, that might made destiny, that if I simply became the strongest, the loudest, the fiercest, I would become the king he wanted, the king I thought I already was. But even kings must learn humility, and gods must fall. From the moment I could stand without a hand to steady me, they called me heir. Even as a child, I wore it like armor. The title, the praise, the expectation carved into every nod, every glance. every whispered prayer in the Hall of Kings. It was never asked of me, only assumed, that I would lead, that I would rule, that I would become Odin's echo and Asgard's future. I believed it. How could I not? I was a storm, barely held in flesh. I charged into lessons with fury, swords clashing in the training yard, my voice louder than my strikes, my pride sharper than any blade. They cheered me. Sif, Volstagg, Fandral, Hagen, we grew together, laughing in taverns, by moonlight, bleeding in mock battles that felt too real, dreaming aloud about glory that had yet to come. We were fearless, arrogant, full of fire and hunger and youth, but I burned hotter than the rest, because the throne wasn't a dream to me, it was a birthright. Loki watched us from the shadows, always just behind, always listening more than speaking. When he joined our fights, his weapons were words and illusions. He could make us see things that weren't there, make us doubt what was. It frustrated me. I wanted action, he wanted control, but I loved him. In my own way, he was my brother, even when we didn't speak the same language. I remember the day Odin brought me into the vault alone, just us. No guards, no crown, no speeches. He showed me the casket of ancient winters, the destroyer, relics of war, of conquest. He said, "These are the memories of peace, Thor, bought with blood, paid in pain." I nodded, but I didn't understand, not then. I thought power meant strength, dominance, victory. I didn't see the weariness in his voice, only the glory in his words. Years passed, my strength grew, so did my pride. I defeated every challenger in the sparring ring, slew beasts that prowled at the edges of the realm. I smiled with confidence and never questioned my own righteousness. I began to speak of my throne, my Asgard. The others laughed, celebrated. Loki said little, just watched. Then came the day of my would-be coronation. The hall was filled with light, golden banners, cheers, Frigga, radiant in white, Odin, solemn, proud. I stood at the center, heart pounding like thunder in my ribs. I had imagined that moment for centuries, and yet it slipped through my fingers before I could grasp it. Frost giants, infiltrating the vault, a breach on the day of my crowning. I saw it not as a warning, but as an insult, an affront, and I demanded retribution. Odin forbade it, said there would be consequences, but I didn't hear him, didn't listen, couldn't. The fire in me was too loud, so I gathered my friends, my blade, my fury, and we marched to Jotunheim, to teach the frost giants what it meant to provoke a god. It was a mistake, not because I lost the battle we returned alive if bloody, but because I revealed who I truly was, to Odin, to my people, to myself, a boy with a hammer and no wisdom to wield it. Odin arrived, his voice shaking the realm with its fury, his eye full of disappointment deeper than rage. He did not strike me. He did not banish my friend. He only spoke 3 words that broke me more than any weapon could. "You are unworthy." And then he took Mjolnir, took my name, took my pride, and cast me to Midgard, Earth, a place I had only spoken of in jest, a realm I had never thought to see. Stripped of power, stripped of purpose, the boy who would be king had to learn how to be a man. I did not fall like a man. I fell like a god made small. One instant I stood in the golden halls of Asgard, stripped of my name, my title, my birthright. The next, I was crashing through the sky, a comet wrapped in fury and shame. The Bifrost tore through space, spitting me out across the stars like discarded armor. Midgard, Earth, a realm I had mocked, filled with mortals I once thought beneath me. Now I lay among them, dust in my mouth, sky burning above me, powerless. I awoke to voices, panicked, curious, mortal. I remember the light first blinding, unnatural, then the pain, a feeling I had not known since childhood, a pain untempered by divine blood. I lashed out, instinct guiding limbs no longer blessed by strength. I was restrained, pinned, needles, noise, restraints I could have once shattered with a flick of the wrist. But I was just a man now, a man in strange clothes, surrounded by strange machines, lost in a world that did not know me. Jane Foster, she was the first mortal to see me not as a threat, but as something curious, a puzzle wrapped in bruises and ancient words. She was kind, fierce too, smarter than I first gave her credit for. She looked at me like I was real, not a god, not a lunatic, just a man fallen from the sky. Darcy was the one who tased me. I later learned, a small vengeance perhaps, for the arrogance I carried even without my powers. Eric Selvig was more cautious. He'd heard the stories, buried in the old myth. Names like Mjolnir, Yggdrasil, Bifrost. He didn't believe them, but I could see it in his eyes. He wanted to. I spoke of the 9 realms like they were etched into every sky. They looked at me like I was broken, and maybe I was. Somewhere in the desert, my hammer had landed. Mjolnir, my companion, my echo, the extension of my will. I could feel it even without its weight in my hand, a pull in my chest, a whisper on the wind. I told Jane I needed to retrieve it. She didn't understand, but she drove me anyway. The site was crawling with machines, men in black, walls built overnight, shining like something out of S.H.I.E.L.D's nightmares. They'd found it, and caged it, as if Mjolnir were a specimen to dissect. They didn't know it only answered to one hand. I broke in, fought my way past their walls, felt strength return in flashes. Not power, just will. The will to reach it, to prove I was still Thor, still worthy, still someone. I grasped the handle, and nothing happened. No lightning, no weightlessness, no rush of divine purpose, just silence. It was as if the hammer looked through me and found only absence. I sank to my knees, hands trembling, face pressed into the dirt like a beggar. And for the first time since childhood, I wept, not because I had lost the power, because I had lost myself. They dragged me away, but I did not fight. How could I, when I had already lost the only battle that mattered? But that night, something changed. Jane came to see me. She didn't speak of gods, or thrones, or battles. She simply offered her hand, and I took it, because in that small human gesture, I felt seen. And in that moment, I began to understand humility, not as a punishment, as a I didn't know it then, but that was the first time I ever truly earned anything. Not through bloodline, not through force, not by lifting Mjolnir, but by listening, by being. I began to learn the rhythm of Midgard, the way mortals move, the way they trusted each other, not because they had to, but because they chose to. That fascinated me. They built bridges not with power, but with belief, with laughter, with kindness, with time. Jane took me in, not as a warrior, not as a god, as a guest. Her home was small, walls lined with books, whiteboards scribbled with theories I could barely comprehend. But there was warmth in those rooms, a kind of calm that I had never known in the golden halls of Asgard. One night, she gave me a notebook. "Write it down," she said, "whatever you remember." And I did. Not of war, not of conquest, of my mother's voice, of the breeze through the fields of Vanaheim, of Loki laughing before the lies, of holding Mjolnir for the first time and feeling alive. Humility didn't come all at once. It crept in slowly. Every time I helped Darcy carry boxes, every time Eric challenged me with logic, every time Jane smiled at me like I wasn't a god, but something better, human. Then the sky cracked. Asgard reached out. The destroyer came, a being of fire and ancient command, its steps shattering earth, its heat leveling all that stood in its path. Sent by Odin, by Loki. I did not know. All I knew was that mortals would die, and I had no power to stop it. I stepped between the beast and the people I had grown to care for, unarmed, unworthy, but unwilling to let them suffer for me. I looked up at the towering armor, and I said the only words that mattered. Take me, not because I wanted to die, because I wanted them to live. And in that surrender, in that moment when I let go of who I thought I was supposed to be, I became who I was meant to be. The wind shifted, the skies rolled, and Mjolnir, it moved, it chose. I felt it before I saw it, a rumble beneath my ribs, a crackle behind my eye, a call older than language. The hammer struck my hand with a force that lit the air. Lightning roared down from the clouds, wrapping me in flame and silver and fury. And I rose, not as prince, not as exile, but as protector. I struck the destroyer with all the force of my return, not for vengeance, for balance, for Midgard, for Jane. When the storm cleared, the people were safe. The machine was dust, and I was no longer the same. I knelt beside the fragments of my past self, and whispered a quiet promise. Never again will I wield this power for pride, only for purpose. Heimdall opened the Bifrost. My exile ended, but I did not walk through that bridge as a god returning from punishment. I walked through as a man reborn. Back in Asgard, the halls looked smaller, the throne less shiny. Loki met me with a smile too wide, a voice too smooth. I sensed it then. The turning, the secrets, the beginning of the end. But that's another tale. For now, all that mattered was this. I had fallen, I had bled, I had changed, and Mjolnir came back to me, because I had finally become worthy of. When I returned to Asgard, the air felt wrong. Not colder, not darker, just quieter. As if something had shifted while I was away. As if the Golden City had started holding its breath. Odin did not greet me. The throne was occupied, and seated upon it, draped in regal cloth that did not quite fit, was my brother, Loki. He smiled when he saw me. But there was no joy in it. Only calculation. Only distance. The warmth we once knew as boys had turned to something sharper. Something masked in charm, but forged in fear. He told me father had fallen into the Odin sleep. That he, Loki, had assumed the throne. Not out of ambition, he claimed, but necessity. Asgard needs guidance, he said. Asgard needs calm. But I saw the truth. The way the guards avoided his eye, the way the servants moved too quickly around corners. The silence in the halls wasn't reverence. It was fear. I wanted to believe him. Truly, to believe that he had changed. That the tricks had ended. That the lies had quieted. But something in me stirred. A warning, a whisper from the edge of old instincts. He spoke kindly. Offered me food, rest, even forgiveness. But not once did he speak of our Father. Not once did he ask where I had gone or what I had learned. He asked only about Mjolnir, where it was, how it felt, whether it obeyed. That night I wandered the palace, my footsteps soft on stone I once ran across as a child. I found Mother sitting by Odin's bedside. He was still too still. Breath shallow, A king lost in dreams too heavy to rise from. Frigga did not look up when I entered. She only said, "Do not judge your brother too quickly." And I asked, "How can I not when he wears a crown built on silence?" She turned to me then, eyes older than the stars, "Because he still longs to be seen." Loki always wanted recognition, not for what he could destroy but for what he could become. But Asgard never saw him that way. Not the court, not the people, not even Odin, and maybe, not even me. Soon truths unraveled. Betrayals rose like cracks in golden glass. Loki had not assumed the throne out of duty. He had let frost giants into the realm. He had whispered in Father's ear, until sleep took him. He had let me fall, and still, a part of me wanted to save him, to pull him back, to remind him of who we were before thrones and prophecy, and bitterness got in the way. But he didn't want saving, not then. He wanted to win. He turned Gungnir against me, unleashed the destroyer again, threatened to wipe out an entire realm, Jotunheim, not out of loyalty to Asgard, but to prove he was strong enough to rule it. We fought, God against God, brother against brother. His words were venom, mine were pleas, and still I hesitated. Even with Mjolnir in my grip, I did not strike to kill, because I still saw him. We clashed on the Bifrost, its colors fractured by our fury. I begged him to stop. He screamed that he had never been Odin's son, and in his eyes I saw the boy I grew up with, buried beneath anger he had carried alone for too long. In the end, he let go, not of the throne, not of power, of the bridge, of me. I reached for him, held tight, but he looked into my eyes and said, "I could have done it, brother." And I whispered, "I know." Then he fell, into the abyss, into shadow. Heimdall closed the Bifrost. The realm held its breath. And I wept, for a brother I couldn't save, for a kingdom fractured by silence, for the weight of a crown I no longer want. After Loki fell, there was quiet. Not the kind that soothes, the kind that presses down, the kind that hums like something unfinished. Asgard stood tall, untouched in stone, but fractured in spirit. The court moved on. The guards resumed their watch. The stars above turned as they always had, but something beneath it all had shifted. The crown weighed heavier in the absence of its most desperate seeker. Odin emerged from the Odin sleep days later. We stood in the throne room once more. He regal and weary, I worn from battle and law. He looked at me and said, "You have changed." I nodded, but I didn't smile, because the change had cost too much. He offered me the throne, not with ceremony, not with fanfare, just the words, and the silent acknowledgement that I had grown into the heir he had once dreamed of. But I refused, not out of fear, not out of rebellion, because I finally understood what it meant to rule. It wasn't glory, it wasn't pride, it wasn't standing tallest in the room. It was loneliness, sacrifice, the quiet ache of putting others before yourself, again and again, without ever asking for thanks. And I wasn't ready. Not then, maybe not ever. So I asked Odin for permission to return to Midgard, to Earth. He gave it grudgingly, with a warning in his eyes that the threads of fate were tightening, that peace would not last, that the storm was not over. Back on Earth, Jane welcomed me with a smile I didn't deserve. I had disappeared abruptly, painfully, but she forgave me, because her heart was bigger than mine, and because she believed. We spent days in quiet. She showed me her world, not just the science and stars, the simple things. A cup of coffee that burned too hot, a movie that made her cry, the way she laughed with her whole chest. When Darcy said something absurd, I watched her lip, and I started to understand something I'd never considered before. that peace is not found in crowns or conquest. It's found in moments, tiny ones, shared. But peace, I would learn, is fleeting. Darkness never waits long. A rift opened, not on earth. In the cosmos, the 9 realms trembled. Portals flared. Anomalies no science could explain began to appear. The fragile balance Odin once forged was unraveling, and the call came again. I returned to Asgard, not as a prince, not as a warrior, as a bridge between realms, between peoples, between peace and war. Sif met me at the gate. She looked older, sharper, more burdened. "Everything's changing," she said, and I nodded, because I felt it too. The way the wind shifted, the way the stars blinked just a little faster, the way Heimdall, who once saw all, now spoke less. I stood once more in the war room, maps unfurled, crises listed, names of worlds I hadn't visited in centuries. Svartalfheim, Vanaheim, Niflheim, all restless, all whispering in the dark. And then, Malekith, the name returned like a curse from the ancient past. The dark elves, thought dead, thought buried beneath the weight of their own ambition. They had returned, and they sought the ether, an ancient power even Odin refused to name aloud. I was tasked to stop him, to find him, to protect the realms. But this time, it was personal, because Malekith had chosen Earth as his path. Because Jane, my Jane, had been touched by the very force he sought. I returned to her side, but she was no longer only human. She shimmered with something old, something deadly, and I knew then, this peace was already breaking. When I found her again, she wasn't herself. Jane stood in the rain, unmoved, her eyes distant, her breath too slow. The scientists ran scans. The machines blinked in alarm. But I knew before the data, before the tests, something had claimed her. Something ancient. The ether. I had only heard the name in whispers, buried in the corners of Asgardian scrolls, etched in warnings older than my father's reign. A relic of chaos, of darkness. It did not rest like the Tesseract, did not hum like Mjolnir. It pulsed, alive, hunting. When Jane touched the portal in the abandoned factory, she fell into the void between realms, and the ether found her. It hid within her, a parasite made of red shadow, feeding, spreading, and yet, it did not destroy her. Not immediately. That was what frightened me most. I took her to Asgard, carried her through the Bifrost, my arms tight around her trembling frame, my heart torn between warrior and man. Frigga was the first to understand. She laid her hand over Jane's chest, and I saw it then. The ether, coiled inside her like fire in a cage. She looked at me and said softly, "This is older than we are." I asked, "Can it be removed?" She hesitated, then said, "At a cost." Odin was less patient. He did not look at Jane, only at what she carried. "The ether is not a tool," he said. "It is a curse. Malekith will come for her." And he was right. Malekith. He rose from the edge of myth, his eyes cold with the memory of 1,000 defeats. He wanted to remake the cosmos in silence. Darkness as purity, uncreation as peace. We braced for war. The guards lined the walls. The skies burned with violet flame. And through it all, Jane stood at the center of fate, frightened, confused, human, but unyielding. Then came the attack. Malekith breached Asgard. His ships screamed through the skies. His cursed warriors tore through the gates, and in the shadows Frigga stood between the ether and the enemy. She did not run. She protected Jane with spells woven from starlight. She fought like a queen, and she fell like one. When I found her, Her hand was still raised as if shielding Jane even in death. Odin stood over her, silent. Not even a god's voice could carry grief like that. The palace dimmed, the bells rang, and all of Asgard wept. But I could not mourn long, because Malekith still breathed, and he still wanted Jane. I turned to Loki. Yes, Loki. Alive, imprisoned, unbroken, and full of fire. I offered him freedom, brief, conditional. He offered me sarcasm and a crooked smile, but he agreed, because he hated Malekith, because he loved Frigga, because perhaps some part of him still remembered what it was to stand beside me. We journeyed to Svartalfheim, the world of ruin, where Malekith had once been banished, where the sun did not rise, where the wind whispered in the tongue of the forgotten. We laid a trap, used Jane as bait, used ourselves as shields, and Malekith came, as I knew he would. There was fire, there was blood. Loki fought beside me, and when it was done, when the smoke cleared, he lay in my arms, wounded, dying. He looked up at me and said, "I didn't do it for you." Then he was gone. I believed it, because I had to. We stopped Malekith. We shattered the ether. We saved Jane, but the cost was too high. I returned to Asgard, but the throne felt colder. I looked at Odin, at the people, and I knew this peace was only a pause. The war was just beginning. When I returned to Asgard, I expected sorrow. I expected the silence of loss, the ache of battles won at too high a cost. But instead, I found applause. Odin welcomed me before the court, declaring Malekith vanquished, the realms secure, and the crown as steady as ever. But something was wrong. It wasn't his voice. Not entirely. It wasn't his eyes, though they lacked their usual storm. It was the pause, a hesitation in the way he called me son. I didn't question it then. I was too tired, too buried in grief. Frigga's absence haunted every hallway, her laughter no longer echoing in the gardens, her warmth no longer balancing Odin's frost. I wandered the palace like a ghost. The throne sat untouched for days. Odin spoke of legacy, of burden, of duty, but I no longer hungered for the weight. I had seen what kingship cost, what it took, and I knew that I was not yet ready to trade love for duty. Not again. So I made my decision. I stood before Odin and said the words I never imagined I would say. I do not want the throne. There was no anger in his face, only a smile, a strange one, almost satisfied. And he said, "Very well, just like that. No fight, no lecture, only calm." And I should have known, because it wasn't Odin. Weeks passed. I returned to Earth briefly, seeking answers, seeking Jane, seeking peace, but my dreams were restless. I saw shadows that didn't belong, echoes of my brother's voice. And then, the news came. Odin was gone, vanished from the palace. No one had seen him in days. I raced back to Asgard, demanded answers. But there was no court, no ceremony, only empty halls and a throne now cold. And seated on that throne, Loki, alive, smiling, wearing our father's face, his armor, his voice. He shed the illusion with a flick of the wrist, and there he was, whole, proud, defiant. "Hello, brother." He had faked his death, banished Odin, ruled Asgard from behind a mask, for years, and no one had noticed. I wanted to strike him, to scream, but I didn't, because part of me wasn't surprised. He told me Odin was on Earth, alone, power fading. We searched together, reluctantly, warily. And in the quiet between battles we remembered childhood laughter, mock duels in the snow, whispers about who we might become. We found Father in Norway, weakened, still, and when he saw us, he smiled, not as a king, as a father. "I'm proud of you both," he said. "Even Loki." And then, he was gone. His body faded into golden light. His spirit released into the wind. Just like that. A king. No more. But we had no time to mourn, because as Odin passed, something stirred. Something old. Something hidden. Hela, our sister. A name stricken from memory, banished from stories, buried by Odin himself. She rose from shadow, armor black as grief, eyes burning with fury older than war. "I am the firstborn," she said, "and the throne is mine." We tried to fight. Mjolnir struck first, but she caught it, held it, crushed it, like clay in her palm. And for the first time in my life, I felt true fear. I had never known helplessness, until the moment she crushed Mjolnir in her hand. The weapon that had once deemed me worthy, the hammer that carved my legend, the power I had come to believe was a part of me, gone, reduced to fragments of Uru, scattered across Norwegian cliffs, shimmering in the dirt like broken promises. Hela turned toward us with no fear, no hesitation, only certainty. She didn't raise her voice, didn't boast. She simply said, "Kneel." We didn't. We ran. The Bifrost opened. Heimdall's doing, I'm sure. But she followed, pursued us through the Rainbow Bridge, splintering the path with every step, her blades carving the air like fate itself. Loki was the first to fall, tossed into the abyss. I reached for him too late, and then she turned to me. We clashed. Steel and fury, rage and disbelief. But I was no match. I was tired, shaken, suddenly unsure of the strength I'd built my life upon. She whispered, "You were never the strongest." And then she struck. The bridge shattered beneath me, colors fractured. The wind screamed, and I fell, through space, through time, through silence. When I awoke, the stars were gone, replaced by steel, neon, a sky that blinked with advertisements and artificial moons. Sakar. I was dragged through corridors, stripped, prodded, tagged like a beast. My arms bound, my voice ignored. Machines spoke in tongues I couldn't decipher. And then, she appeared, the Grand Master's enforcer, Valkyrie. She didn't tell me her name then, only that I was property now, another contender for the arena. She shocked me, literally, and laughed. They called me the new guy, shoved me into a chair, slapped armor on my chest, talked about ratings and death counts and schedules. I was no longer a prince, just another gladiator. Then I met him, in chains, in shadow. My opponent, the champion, the Hulk, not Banner, not the scientist, the other, the beast, green, raging, smiling, and for a moment, I was relieved. A familiar face, a friend. I called his name. He roared in return, and then he punched me through a wall. We fought, not as allies, not as avengers, as animals in a cage. The crowd screamed, weapons clashed. I tried to talk, to reason, but the Hulk knew no reason here, only applause, only survival. It was not strength that saved me, it was memory. In the blur of fists and fury, I heard her voice, my father's, and something deeper, inside, the storm, not outside of me, in me. I rose, lightning danced across my skin, called not by Mjolnir, but by me, and I struck. Thunder cracked the arena walls. For the first time, I was more than the hammer, I was the storm. The thunder did not come from the sky. It came from within, from something I had buried, beneath arrogance, beneath armor, beneath the weight of everything I thought made me powerful. The lightning obeyed not the hammer, but me. I stood over the Hulk, sparks still dancing across my skin, and for the first time since the fall, I remembered who I was without Mjolnir. I was still Thor, not because of what I held, but because of what I chose. Of course, the Grand Master didn't care for awakenings. He panicked, cheated, triggered some device on my neck that made the world spin. The crowd cheered anyway. They didn't care who won, only that we bled. I awoke in a suite that mocked luxury. Gaudy gold, synthetic comfort, no windows, just walls too clean to trust, and a view of a city built on ruin and distraction. Hulk was there too, still himself. No banner, no words, just grunts and half-sentences, and the childlike anger of someone trapped too long in a body not meant to last. We spoke, sort of. I told him we had to leave, to save Asgard, to stop Hela. He threw a giant ball at my face, but eventually, he listened. Valkyrie returned, drunk, guarded, hiding something deep behind every joke. I saw the mark on her shoulder, the symbol of the Valkyrie. She denied it, lied, even, but I knew. I had seen the Valkyrie in stories, in paintings. They were warriors of legend, Odin's chosen, and now, only one remained. I asked her why she ran. She didn't answer, not with words, only silence, and I understood. We formed a plan, not perfect, not clean, but enough. We'd steal a ship, break free, find Loki. Yes, Loki, again, and escape Sakar. Loki, of course, had found a way to charm the Grandmaster, but charm wears thin, especially with me. We fought, again, words, knives, memories twisted into weapons, but I didn't hate him, not fully, not anymore. He was still my brother, even if I could no longer trust him. I left him there, bound, unconscious, because sometimes love means walking away, even from family. We stole a ship, a gaudy pleasure cruiser with fireworks built into the hull, and we flew through the devil's anus. Yes, that's what they called it. A cosmic storm spinning like a wound in the stars. Hulk screamed the whole way. Valkyrie didn't flinch. And me, I closed my eyes and remembered Asgard. We landed. The sky over Asgard was bleeding. Smoke rose from the palace. Hela's banners hung like curses over every gate. The people were hiding, scattered, afraid. She had brought death to our door, and I had no hammer to stop her. But I had allies. Valkyrie, Hulk, Heimdall, still fighting in the shadows. And soon, Loki. Yes, he returned, with a stolen ship and a smirk that said, "Don't ask how." Together we rallied the people, gathered them, protected them, and as Hela marched through the courtyard, I stood before her one last time. She smiled. "You are nothing without that hammer." I breathed in. Let the lightning rise through my spine. Let the storm crack the sky. And I said, "Are you?" The sky split above us, the wind thick with ash and ash-colored memory. I faced her, Hela, my sister, born of conquest, crowned in shadow. She walked toward me across the shattered bridge, every step peeling back at another layer of the Asgard I had known. The palace behind her was cracked open, statues toppled, history rewritten by her blade. She believed she was saving us, restoring the empire Odin had buried. But I knew this was not salvation. This was the end. I struck first. Lightning surged down my arms. not from Mjolnir, long since dust, but from the storm inside me. It answered now, freely, violently. We clashed across the bifrost, our power tearing the rainbow beneath our feet. Hela laughed, not from joy, from certainty. She was stronger, older, fueled by fury and the dead. And no matter how I fought, I could not stop her. Every blade I broke, she conjured two more. Every strike I landed, she absorbed. And when she looked at me with those ancient burning eyes, I saw no sister, only death. Meanwhile, the people fled. Heimdall led them through the back passages of the palace. Valkyrie guarded the young. Hulk roared against the undead beasts she had unleashed. We were fighting a war we couldn't win. And deep down, I knew we weren't meant to. Because Asgard wasn't a place. Not really. It wasn't the palace, the throne, the gold. It was the people, the culture, the heart. And if we could save that, we didn't need to save the rest. That's when I saw it. The mural, hidden behind the throne. Old, unfinished. It showed Odin, not as king, but as conqueror. It showed Hela beside him, smiling, a blade in one hand, the universe bleeding from the other. He had erased her from history, buried her legacy, and now it returned to bury us. So I made a choice, a final one, not to win, to destroy, to break the cycle. I called to Loki, told him where to find Surtur's crown, told him to bring it to the eternal flame. He hesitated, of course, but only for a breath. Then he vanished into the vaults. Moments later, the mountain moved. The sky turned molten, and Surtur rose. His body was flame given shape, his sword the size of a city. He towered over Asgard, rising like prophecy from the bones of myth. Hela turned, and for the first time, she looked afraid. I grabbed what I could. Valkyrie, Hulk, the last of the refugees. We boarded the ship Loki had stolen, lifted into the clouds, and from the skies above, I watched Asgard burn. Surtur struck the palace. The foundation cracked, fire poured across the land. Hela screamed, vanished beneath the ruin, and Asgard was gone, not failed, not lost, freed, because in its end we found our beginning. The people looked to me. I did not wear a crown, I did not sit on a throne, but they called me king, and this time, I did not refuse. The stars stretched out before us, endless, quiet, cold. Behind us, Asgard burned. Ahead of us, nothing, only space, only survival. We drifted in silence, a ship full of refugees, orphans of a world reduced to ash. And I sat among them. No crown, no ceremony, only loss. The weight of it settled slowly. I tried to be strong, to be the leader they expected, but my chest ached. Not with pain, with emptiness. Not long ago, I believed kings were chosen by birth, by lineage, by worthiness. Now I understood, kings are chosen by those who follow. Valkyrie moved among the people, offering comfort, instructions, steadiness. She didn't need armor to be a warrior. She had become more than a Valkyrie. She was a protector, and I trusted her more than I trusted myself. Loki stood at the edge of the bridge, watching the stars. He didn't gloat, didn't argue. He just stood there quiet, thoughtful. We hadn't spoken much since Sakar, since the fall, but in that silence, there was no malice, only memory. I walked to him. He raised an eyebrow, half a smile playing at his lips. "So what now?" he asked. I shrugged. "I suppose I rebuild." He He nodded. For what it's worth, he said, you'd have made a decent king. I laughed. High praise coming from you. And for a moment, we were brothers again. We charted a course for Earth. Midgard, a place where the people might find shelter. A second chance. I thought of Jane, of the quiet mornings, and cold coffee, of things left unsaid, and I wondered if I still belonged there. The people needed hope, so I gave it to them, told them of rebuilding, of unity, of survival, even if I didn't fully believe it yet, because sometimes leadership isn't certainty, it's presence. Then the sky darkened, the ship shook, the stars vanished, something massive blocked the light. A ship, no, a fortress, twice the size of ours. Black metal and cruel geometry, a presence that made the very air feel heavier. Loki paled. I know that ship, he whispered, and in my bones I knew what followed was not salvation, but death. The doors opened. A figure stepped forward, tall, armored, eyes like coals burning beneath a gaunt face. Thanos. I had heard whispers of him, in war rooms, across realms, from the mouths of dying warriors, a name more feared than death itself. Thanos, the mad titan. I expected fury. I expected fire. What I found was calm, too calm. He boarded our ship like a king, returning to a kingdom. No rush, no wasted movement, only precision. We stood in his path. Loki, Hulk, Heimdall and I. We fought. We tried. Hulk struck first. Furious. Relentless. Thanos didn't even flinch. He beat the Hulk with terrifying ease. Every punch was deliberate, cold, efficient. Loki moved next. He tried to trick him, tried to stab him, tried to protect me. But Thanos saw through him. He always saw through everything. When he lifted Loki by the neck, I screamed, but I couldn't move. I was bound, kneeling, helpless. Loki looked at me one last time. No tricks in his eyes, only truth, only goodbye. And then, snap, my brother fell. Not vanishing, not fading, just gone. Gone like the hundreds of others Thanos had slaughtered on his path to balance. He destroyed the Tesseract with a flick of his hand, extracted the stone from it, one of 6, the Space Stone, and with that, he vanished. But before he left, he ordered the ship destroyed. Explosives, flames, debris, everything gone. I floated, alone, among bodies. Ash, silence, time slipped. I don't know how long I drifted. Could have been minutes, hours, years. But then, a light, a ship, rescue, familiar tech, not Asgardian. It was them, the Guardians, a ragtag crew of misfits and music. They pulled me aboard. Quill, Rocket, Groot, Drax, Mantis. They didn't understand the weight of what had happened. Not yet. But they tried. They listened. I told them everything. The stones, the slaughter, the Titan. And I made a vow. I will kill Thanos. Not as a king. Not as a god. As a son. A brother. As the last of Asgard. We tracked him to Nidavellir, home of the dwarves, home of the forge that once birthed Mjolnir. What we found was ruin. The forges were cold, the halls empty. Only one dwarf remained, his hands cast in metal, Thanos' punishment for forging the Infinity Gauntlet. But he remembered me, and he agreed to help. We would build a new weapon, not a hammer, an axe, Stormbreaker, forged in the heart of a dying star. A king's weapon, meant to summon the Bifrost itself. I held the dying star open with my bare hands, screamed as my skin burned, bones cracked, blood boiled. But I did not stop, because rage burned hotter than flame, because I needed that weapon, because this time, failure was not an option. And when the handle found its way to me, a living root from Groot's own arm, I rose. Lightning surged through me, stronger than ever before, and I knew, the next time I faced Thanos, I would not miss. Wakanda. I had never set foot there, but I knew the name. Even in Asgard, whispers of its strength reached us. A kingdom cloaked in myth, hidden, brilliant, ancient. And now it was the last stand, the final hope, because Vision was there, and inside his head the Mind Stone, the final piece, the one Thanos needed to end everything. We came through the Bifrost in light and rage. Me, Rocket, Groot. I landed like a storm. Lightning crackled from my fingers, eyes burning with vengeance. The battlefield was chaos. Creatures, machines, screams. I didn't wait. I tore through the front lines. Stormbreaker finding flesh, bone, metal. I was fury. I was grief. I was ready, and for a moment, I thought we were winning. Banner clumsy in the Hulkbuster armor. Okoye, Shuri, Cap, Nat, Rhodey, T'Challa. They all fought, together. A family forged by loss. Then the sky darkened again. Thanos. He walked like an inevitability. Not fast, not slow, just sure. We struck him. All of us. Waves of force, weapons, magic. He barely flinched. One by one they fell, and then it was me, face to face, with the thing that had taken everything. Loki, Heimdall, half of my people. I threw Stormbreaker, with everything I had, and it struck true, buried deep into his chest. He gasped, blood spilled. I stepped closer, looked him in the eye, and said, I told you, you'd die for that. But it wasn't enough. His hand rose, gauntlet lit with 6 stones, and he snapped his fingers. There was no sound, no explosion, just silence. I blinked, looked around. Everyone was standing, breathing, alive. Then Bucky turned to Ash, then T'Challa, then Wanda, then Sam, then Groot. Rocket screamed, Banner cursed. Okoye fell to her knees. And me, I just stood there, watching it all slip away. Thanos vanished, and we lost. I sat on the battlefield for hours, covered in blood that didn't matter. Hands empty, heart hollow. I should have gone for the head. That phrase echoed again and again, and I knew I had failed, not as a god, as a protector. We didn't bury the fallen. There were no bodies, only dust, only echoes of names we still whispered into the wind, hoping they'd answer back. They never did. We returned to Earth in pieces. The Avengers, broken. The Guardians, scattered. The universe, halved. And I was silent. We tracked Thanos to a distant planet. A garden world. Quiet. Peaceful. Too peaceful. It made me furious. How could he find calm in the wake of such ruin? We stormed his home. Fury in our blood. Weapons drawn. But we found him. Weakened. Scarred. Alone. He told us he had destroyed the stones. Used them. Fulfilled his purpose. And then reduced them to atoms. That was when I struck. Stormbreaker flashed once, and his head rolled from his shoulders. No one moved. No one cheered. Not even me, because it was too late. The universe was already broken, and we were too. I left the others, retreated, not to Asgard. There was no Asgard. We found a place by the sea, built a village, a home, new Asgard. The name sounded hollow in my mouth. Valkyrie watched over the people, led them, protected them. She was everything I could not be. And I faded. I stopped speaking, stopped training, stopped being. Food, drink, distraction. I let it consume me. My body grew heavy. My thoughts clouded. Stormbreaker hung on the wall, untouched. They called me king, but I was no ruler, only a shadow with lightning buried under guilt. The worst part, no one blamed me. Not really. They pitied me. That was worse. Then the call came. Bruce, Scott, time travel, a plan, a chance. At first I refused. What good was I now? What god becomes a ghost in his own skin? But they needed me, not because I was strong, because I remembered, because the past lived in my bones. I went to Asgard, the old one. The palace stood whole. Frigga still lived, and I saw her, alive, breathing, wise. She saw through me instantly. She always did. She told me, "You're not the man you were. You're not the man you're going to become. Just be who you are today." I cried, held her, smelled her perfume one last time, and left, with Mjolnir in my hand. It came to me again because worthiness is not perfection. It is the willingness to rise even when you have already fallen. I held Mjolnir again. It was heavier than I remembered. Not in weight, in meaning. It had returned to me, chosen me, forgiven me, and maybe in some quiet way, I forgave myself too. We gathered again. The ones who remained: Steve, Tony, Bruce, Natasha, Clint, Scott, Rhodey, Rocket, Nebula, and me. The plan was madness. Time travel through the quantum realm. Retrieve the Infinity Stones from their places in time. Undo the snap. Bring them back. Bring everyone back. We split into teams. Missions across decades. Risk layered over risk. But it worked. Mostly. Except we lost her. Natasha. She didn't return. To get the Soul Stone, one must lose what they love. She gave everything. For us. For the world. For Clint. We didn't get to bury her. No funeral. No goodbye. Only silence. When we returned, we assembled the gauntlet. The stones pulsed with power older than time itself. Too much power for any mortal to wield. So Banner took it. Gamma in his blood. Hope in his heart. He snapped. A burst of light. A wave of energy. And then, birdsong. Real. Alive. We rushed to the windows. Sunlight. Greenery. And ringing phones. They were back. Peter. Strange. Sam. Bucky. Wanda. All of them. Every soul wiped from existence. Returned. And then the sky darkened. A ship. Thanos. Not the one I had killed. The one from the past. He had followed us. Knew everything. And he came for war. We faced him. Me. Tony. Steve. 3 against a god. He wielded a double-bladed sword. His armor gleaming with bloodshed. No stones. Not yet. But still dangerous. Still inevitable. We fought. I dual-wielded Mjolnir and Stormbreaker. Thunder danced in my veins. Steve lifted the hammer and my heart nearly stopped. Wielded it like he was born to. Because he was. Because worthiness sees truth. But Thanos was relentless. He broke us down, one by one. crushing hope. Then the portals opened. Every ally, every warrior, every friend. They came. Wakanda, the Ravagers, the Wizards, Asgardians, Avengers, everyone. And the charge began. Across shattered ground, through smoke and fire, I ran beside Steve, axe in hand. We were not gods. We were something greater, united. The battle roared around us. Clashes of metal, magic slicing through air, dust rising with every explosion. I'd never seen anything like it. It wasn't a war. It was a reckoning. The past, the future, all colliding in one impossible moment. I fought beside gods, kings, spies, sorcerers, and children. Rocket clung to Groot. Valkyrie flew on a winged horse. Pepper wore armor. Even Peter, the small one, the spider boy, he fought, so brave, so fast, so full of life. Thanos pressed forward, relentless, every swing of his blade shaking the field. His army came like a wave, endless, but we did not back down. We could not. I struck again and again. Stormbreaker sang. Mjolnir followed, but it wasn't enough. He reached for the gauntlet. It slid across the battlefield like fate itself. Clint grabbed it first, ran like death was at his heels. Then T'Challa, then Peter, then Valkyrie. A game of cosmic keep away, with the soul of the universe on the line. Then Carol arrived, blinding, unstoppable. She struck Thanos with power I had only ever seen in stars, but he adapted. He always did. He pulled the power stone, used it to punch her from the sky, and then he snapped. But nothing happened, because the stones were gone. I turned, and there he was, Tony, gauntlet fused to his arm, fingers trembling, eyes locked on Thanos, and he said it, quiet, steady, "I am Iron Man." And he snapped. The field changed. The monsters faded. The ships crumbled. The dust turned to light. Thanos watched his army vanish, watched the silence return, and he sat, not as a king, as a failure. Then he was gone, but so was Tony. He collapsed in a heap of armor and light. I reached him. So did Peter. So did Pepper. His breath was shallow. His skin pale, burned from the inside out. He looked at her, at us, and he was at peace. The man who began it all, ended it all. He gave everything to bring everyone back. There were no gods in that moment, no kings, no avengers, just friends, mourning the best of us. We won, that's what they said. The threat was gone. The dust returned. The Titan defeated. The world celebrated. But for me, there was no victory. Tony was gone. The genius, the ego, the heart, gone. And in his place, a silence too heavy to name. We gave him a funeral by the lake, the sun reflecting off the water. The wind stilled. Everyone came. Kings, spies, soldiers, strangers from other galaxies. All of them, silent, mourning not just a man, but a symbol. I stood beside Peter, beside Pepper, beside Rhodey. I tried to say something, anything, but no words came. What could I possibly say? What comfort could a god offer when he had failed again? We laid the arc reactor on the water, proof that Tony Stark has a heart, and we watched it drift away. Later I sat on the steps of the cabin, the same one where Tony raised his daughter. Morgan, too young to understand what had been lost, too full of light to be crushed by it. I envied her. That kind of innocence. I hadn't known it in centuries. I thought of Loki, of Odin, Frigga, Heimdall, of Asgard, of the people I couldn't save, and I felt empty. Steve came to me after. He was quiet, thoughtful, told me he was going to return the stones, put them back in time, so none of it unraveled. I nodded, trusted him. Steve always kept his word, but he didn't come back the same way. Not through the portal, not through time. He sat on a bench, older, still peaceful. He gave Sam the shield, passed the legacy to someone who understood what it meant to fight for others. I looked in Steve's eyes. He was done, and for the first time, he looked happy. I envied that too. I returned to New Asgard, stood before the people. They waited for orders, for speeches, for declarations of what we'd rebuild next. But I had nothing left to give. So I handed Valkyrie the crown, told her she was queen now, and she didn't refuse. She stepped forward, lifted her chin, accepted the weight, because she was ready, because I never truly was. She asked me where I'd go. I said, I'm not sure. Somewhere I can find out who I really am. She smiled. I think you already know. You're just afraid to admit it. And maybe she was right. Maybe beneath the thunder, the armor, the king, was someone still searching, still healing. I left the throne behind, left the halls, the banners, the titles. Let Valkyrie rule. She had strength. I never did. The kind that doesn't need a hammer or a crown to lead. The people would follow her. I needed to find something else. So I joined them. The Guardians. A talking raccoon, a tree who only said one phrase, a green assassin, a sarcastic human with a playlist addiction, and me. It sounds like the start of a joke. Maybe it was, but it felt right. Quill raised an eyebrow when I stepped aboard. Are you sure? He asked. I nodded. He didn't argue. We drifted, jumped between systems, helped where we could, fought when we had to. It wasn't glorious, wasn't clean, but it was real. I shared a bunk with Rocket. He snored, talked in his sleep, woke up grumpy, but over time we understood each other. He'd lost more than he ever let on, and so had I. We didn't talk about Earth, not much. Didn't talk about Tony, or Steve, or the ones we lost. But sometimes, we just sat in silence, and that was enough. Groot liked to sit on my shoulder. I didn't mind. It reminded me of simpler times, before thrones, before prophecy, before I became an idea instead of a person. Nebula was different, sharp, quiet, always watching. She didn't trust me at first, but over time, that changed. We fought side by side once, on a moon crawling with parasites. She saved me. I saved her. Neither of us mentioned it again. That's just how it worked. Then there was Quill. We butted heads constantly. He hated when I touched the controls. I hated his music at first. But under the jokes and posturing, there was something familiar. A man carrying too much, trying too hard. I knew that feeling. We were more alike than we wanted to admit. One night, he asked me what I was running from. I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure anymore if I was running or searching. We landed on a planet called Morag. Ruins, silence, a temple buried beneath time. There was a beacon there, a call we had to investigate. Inside the temple I saw carvings, a hammer, a storm, a god of old. Not me, but familiar, and I wondered, how many versions of Thor had the universe known? How many identities had I tried on and shed like armor? After the mission, I sat alone, staring at the stars. I didn't feel like a god. I didn't feel like a warrior. I didn't feel like a king. I just felt tired, but not lost. Not anymore, because for the first time in centuries, I never imagined a life outside Asgard. For so long, my identity was carved into the walls of that golden city. Every step I took echoed through halls built on legacy and war. But now, with nothing left to prove, I began to hear other echoes, quieter ones. Some nights, I would stand outside the ship, let the stars hum against my skin, and I'd think of those I had lost. Frigga, Loki, Heimdall, the family I was born into, and the one I found. They never left me. Not really. Their voices returned in dreams, in silence, in the shape of the wind as it curled behind me during battle. Not speaking, just watching. I used to believe that thunder was loud, crashing, demanding. But real thunder, the kind that lives inside you, can whisper. And I began to listen. The Guardians kept moving. Quill hunted for Gamora, not the one we knew, but a version of her from another thread in time. He never said it out loud, but the emptiness in his voice grew. Rocket got quieter, only swore when he meant it. We shared drinks sometimes, mostly silence. Nebula trained alone, sparred against herself, fighting memories she didn't talk about. And I started writing. Just fragments, memories, a storm I couldn't let pass unspoken. One entry was about Loki, not the tricks, not the betrayals, just the moments between. The times he made me laugh without trying. The way he studied everything like the world was hiding its best parts. I missed him. I hated him. I loved him. And sometimes, all at once. Another entry was about Jane. Not the scientist. Not the goddess she would one day become. Just Jane. The way she sipped her coffee. The way her voice dropped when she was tired. The way she always asked questions no one else thought to ask. I wondered if she would ever forgive me for leaving. I wondered if I'd ever forgive myself. Then one day, a call came through the ship. A message from Earth. New Asgard. Something was wrong. They didn't say what. Just that they needed me. And I knew. My rest was over. When I arrived, Valkyrie greeted me with steel in her eyes. "There's a being," she said, "killing gods." The name sent a chill through the air. Go. Gar. The name carried weight, not because of stories passed down through warriors, but because of silence, the kind that settles when even gods are afraid to speak. Valkyrie showed me the reports. Temple worlds desecrated, cosmic shrines turned to ash, pantheons empty, no survived, no prayers left behind, only marks burned into stone, each one the same. The gods will answer. I hadn't seen fear in her eyes before. Not like this. And if she was afraid, I needed to understand why. We tracked him through whispers, through systems that had once been vibrant, now reduced to hushed rumors and empty altars. Rocket stayed behind. The Guardians had their own path to walk, but I couldn't ignore this. This wasn't about duty. It was personal, because I was a god, and gods were dying. Then came the dream. I saw him. Pale skin, eyes sunken like black holes. A blade made of shadows that moved like it breathed. He spoke without moving his lips. "You were late," and I awoke with sweat clinging to my skin like frost. We found the next planet too late. Its gods impaled, their blood suspended midair, weightless. Their followers huddled in caves, too afraid to pray. They had worshipped light. Now they lived in darkness. I found one survivor, a child. She looked at me and asked, "Why didn't you help them?" And I had no answer. Stormbreaker hummed at my back, but I felt no thunder, only shame. Valkyrie told me to rest, but I couldn't, because something was stirring, a memory, a whisper I buried too deep. Years ago, I had visited Omnipotent City, the realm of the gods, a place where beings older than galaxies sat in golden courts and debated how to do nothing at all. They laughed, feasted, dismissed the prayers of mortals like background noise. I remember thinking then, are we truly worthy of worship? Gorr had asked the same question, only he had found an answer in blood. When he finally came for us, it was quiet. No announcement, no monologue, just shadow. Black tendrils creeping across the sky, stars flickering out one by one. And then he stepped forward, calm, controlled. "I'm not here for war," he said. "I'm here for judgment." We fought. His blade tore through light itself. My lightning sputtered in its presence. Stormbreaker met the necro sword and screamed in my hand. Valkyrie fought beside me, fierce, unrelenting, but he was fast, too fast. He knew our moves before we made them, and then he took the children. He took the children of New Asgard, not for ransom, not for leverage, for a message, a reminder that gods could not protect their own, that belief could be broken, not by blades, but by fear. The children were gone, lifted in a cloud of black smoke and whispering things that had no mouths. I had seen war, I had seen loss, but this was something colder. Something ancient. I stood in the wreckage of the hall. Tiny belongings still scattered across the floor. Drawings, toys, hope, all stolen. Valkyrie cursed, broke a bench with her bare hands. I didn't stop her, because I felt the same. Only my rage didn't roar. It simmered, low, heavy. I sat with Stormbreaker in my lap. And I remembered something. A moment from years ago, a boy in the Asgardian training yards. I was no older than the children Gorr had taken, and I asked my father, "What makes a god?" He said, "A god is what people need you to be." So I needed to be something more. We followed the trail of the necro sword. It bled darkness wherever it went, tore rips between realms, and there, in the silence between stars, the shadow realm. We crossed the void using Stormbreaker. The Bifrost hummed, but the light around us flickered unnaturally. It was like flying through a dream that knew it was a nightmare. No color, no sound, only black and white, and a cold that didn't touch the skin, just the soul. When we arrived, everything was wrong. The shadows moved. They watched. Not just absence of light. They were alive. I called to the children. No answer. Only echo. Only laughter not meant for joy. And then he came. Gorr, walking barefoot across stone that cracked under nothing. The children huddled behind bars made of shade. He stood between us. "I could kill you now," he said. "But that's not the point." He looked me in the eye. "I want you to see." He told me his story, his world, his gods, how they let his daughter die, how they laughed when he begged, and how the sword found him whispered truth. The truth, that gods don't save people, they use them. I said nothing, because I knew there was poison in his word, but I also knew there was pain. He offered me a choice: stand down, let the gods fall, or watch them fall one by one. I told him no. We fought. The shadows swarmed. Valkyrie slashed through them. I summoned lightning in a realm that rejected light. Every strike echoed forever, but he was fast. And then Jane arrived, with Mjolnir in her hand. I couldn't believe my eyes. There she stood, Jane, armor gleaming, cape flowing behind her like a banner of defiance. And in her hand, Mjolnir, whole, alive, crackling with power. I called out her name. She didn't hesitate, didn't flinch. She leapt into battle like she'd always been part of it, swinging the hammer like it had always belonged to her. And in that moment, it did. She fought with fire, with precision, with something deeper than rage. Purpose. Gore snarled. The necrosword shifted in his grip, reacting, feeding, but Jane didn't back down. She moved like lightning in human form. Valkyrie and I joined her. For the first time in what felt like forever, we weren't just surviving. We were pushing him back. I looked at Jane, really looked, and for a moment, I forgot everything else. There she was, strong, alive, and yet, there was something behind her eyes, a shadow not cast by Gore. Later, when the shadows scattered and Gore retreated, we returned to New Asgard, and I asked her. She hesitated, then showed me the hospital files, the diagnosis, stage 4. Aggressive, untreatable. The hammer had called to her, given her strength, allowed her to stand again. But every time she used it, it drained her further, kept her alive, but not healing, not really. I didn't know what to say. I, who had battled titans, who had crossed galaxy, who had faced death with fists raised. I could do nothing. She looked at me, smiled, and said, "I'm not afraid. I just want the time I have left to matter." So we trained together, talked, we laughed again. Not like before, something quieter, more fragile, but real. She asked me if I ever regretted walking away from the crown, from Asgard. I said, every day, and not once, at the same time. She understood. Then we got the signal. Gore wasn't done. He was heading for eternity. I froze when I heard it, because eternity wasn't a place. It was a being, a cosmic entity, older than thought, resting at the center of existence. If Gore reached it, he could wish for anything, one wish, any wish, even the end of all God. The path to eternity wasn't marked by stars. It was marked by loss, by choices that echoed louder than any thunder. Gore was already ahead. The children were still trapped, hidden in a dimension that bent to his will. And the key to his plan was Stormbreaker, my weapon, because it wasn't just an axe. It could summon the Bifrost, a direct path to eternity's gate. We had to stop him. We didn't have time to rally armies, to call on allies. This fight was ours. Mine. Jane's. Valkyrie's. But Valkyrie was wounded. The blade Gore struck her with was no ordinary wound. It went deeper into the soul. She couldn't continue. And Jane, she shouldn't have. Her body was weakening. The hammer gave her strength, but it pulled at her life like a tide refusing to recede. I begged her to rest, to let me face Gore alone. She looked at me, smiled softly, and said, "That's not how we work, Thor. We traveled to the edge of the known realms, through storms that whispered forgotten truths, past stars that blinked like dying eyes, until finally we arrived. The gates of eternity, a plane of pure light. It shimmered, rippling with creation itself. At the center, A pool of glowing energy, still and perfect. Eternity, waiting. Silent, Gore stood before it, Stormbreaker planted like a key in the ground. The portal was opening. I shouted his name. He turned, but there was no surprise in his face, only calm. He welcomed us like a prophet at the end of his sermon. "You're too late," he said, and maybe we were. But that never stopped me before. We charged, Jane to the left, I to the right. Lightning and shadows collided. The necrosword screamed. Mjolnir shattered and reformed mid-air. The ground broke beneath us. Gore fought like a man with nothing to lose. Because he didn't. His daughter was already gone. His faith already burned to ash. All that remained was conviction. But we didn't fight to destroy him. We fought to reach him, to remind him what he had forgotten: love. As I lay battered, broken, and beaten, I saw Jane glowing, her final strength. She held Mjolnir high, and brought it down not on Gore, on the sword. The necrosword cracked, splintered, disintegrated. Gore collapsed, weak, dying. But the gate remained open. He could still make the wish. He looked at us, at Jane, at me, and finally, at the stars. And he wished for her, his daughter. Eternity answered. Light poured into the void, and there she was, whole, alive, made of something more than flesh, born from cosmic grace. Gore wept, held her in his arms, then looked at me and whispered, "Take care of her." And he was gone. Jane fell next, her breath fading. I held her, begged her to stay. She smiled. "You're not alone, Thor." And then, she was stardust. The sky above eternity was unlike anything I had seen. It didn't shimmer like the stars. It pulsed, with memory, with time, with possibility. And within that light, she was gone. Jane vanished into golden dust, lifted into the arms of something bigger than gods, than galaxies. I knelt there, in the glow of the universe's heart, with nothing left to swing at, nothing left to conquer, no army to face, no monster to strike down, just silence and a child. She looked up at me, eyes wide, but not afraid. She was made of eternity, not born wished into existence, and yet, somehow real, so real. She said nothing, but took my hand, and something shifted in my chest. A weight I hadn't realized was still there, moved. I didn't go back to New Asgard right away. Valkyrie understood. She ruled with steadiness, with peace. I needed something else. I needed time. The girl, she didn't remember her father. Not fully. She remembered warmth, the echo of a song, the feeling of a hand in hers before the dark came. And now, she had me. I tried to be strong, firm, the kind of protector I thought she needed. But she didn't need that. She needed presence, a roof, laughter, and someone to tell her she was safe. We wandered for a while, just the two of us, helping where we could, flying between cries for help and quiet sunsets. We weren't running, we were healing. She drew pictures in the dust of every planet we landed on. A goat with wings, a hammer with eyes, me always taller than the stars. She called herself Love, named not for what she was, but for what she came from. Stormbreaker responded to her better than it ever did to me. She could hold it, could lift it, not with power, but with heart. I taught her how to fight, how to cook, how to listen when the wind shifts before lightning strikes. She taught me how to stop, how to be still, how to feel joy again without waiting for it to be taken. We found a new kind of life. Not a prince and his army, not a god and his war, Just a father and a daughter. We painted the ship. We named it. We flew into battle when needed, but always came back to each other. They started calling us something new, not just Thor, but Love and Thunder. And for the first time in centuries, that name felt right. The thing about peace is, it's quiet, almost too quiet, if you've lived your life in the sound of war. At night, when the stars whispered and the girl slept tucked into the crook of a cloak, I once wore into battle, my mind wandered, not into fear, not into grief, but into memory. I started hearing voices again, not like madness, more like echoes, the past. It doesn't stay buried when your footsteps stretch across centuries. Sometimes I'd hear Frigga's laugh, soft and distant, like wind through golden leaves in Asgard's gardens. She would have adored the girl, spoiled her rotten. Other nights, I'd remember Loki, not the tricks, not the lies, the smaller things, like how he always sat with his back to the wall, how he hummed when he read, how he whispered apologies even when he thought I couldn't hear. There were dreams too, of Heimdall, of the Bifrost, of stars streaking past as we chased something urgent and unnamed. Heimdall always spoke in riddles, but in dreams he was clearer. He told me I had changed. I asked him if that was good. He didn't answer, only smiled. The girl, Love, she kept asking questions, endless questions. Did you always have a beard? Can goats understand sarcasm? Do stars die of old age or sadness? Sometimes I made up answers. Sometimes I told the truth, but mostly I marveled at how much wonder she carried, like it was armor. The universe had already tried to take everything from her, but she smiled anyway. We returned to New Asgard once, briefly. Valkyrie had turned the place into something beautiful, not a kingdom, a home. The people were thriving. Kids trained with wooden sword. Old warriors taught them to laugh between strikes. It felt alive. She asked me if I wanted to stay. I looked around and said no. Not yet. I wasn't done listening to the stars. Not yet done asking the question that had haunted me longer than any enemy. What am I now? Not a prince, not a god, not a king, but something new. A man learning to be small in a universe that once demanded he be enormous. We kept moving, not aimless, just open. Where there was trouble, we helped. Where there was need, we answered. But sometimes the universe didn't need thunder. It just needed kindness. We visited planets that glowed with bioluminescent trees, moon colonies where gravity felt like memory, asteroid temples where monks prayed in silence to the rhythm of their own breath. And in all of them, whispers of me, of her, of us. Legends had a way of growing on their own, even when you weren't trying, especially when you weren't trying. In one system they called me the fallen star. In another they called her the daughter of light. She liked that one, told everyone it was her idea. I didn't correct her, but not every realm welcomed us. Some feared gods now, blamed us for the silence left after Thanos, blamed me, and I couldn't argue. In one village, a child threw a rock at me. It bounced harmlessly off my chest, but the sting went deeper than the skin. He shouted, "You didn't save my father." And I wanted to explain, to say how many we lost, how hard we fought, but none of that would matter to him. So I said, "I'm sorry," and meant it. We left that place quietly, not defeated, just reminded. Love handled it better than I did. She kept me steady, asked questions when I got too quiet, pulled me back when I drifted into thought. She even carved runes into Stormbreaker's handle when I wasn't looking. I asked her what they meant. She grinned. It's a secret. One night, on a floating platform lit by drifting plasma butterflies, we met an old woman. She had no name, or at least she claimed not to, but she told stories like the stars were her diary. She spoke of a realm I'd never heard of, a place beyond even the Bifrost, where time ran in spirals and souls didn't end. They transformed. She said something I'll never forget. You carry too many lives in your heart. Let some go so the new ones have space. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I couldn't, because I didn't want to let the silence win. So I sat by Love, watched her breathe, watched her dream, and for the first time in what felt like centuries, I wasn't haunted by what I had lost, only humbled by what I had found. We were halfway through a nebula when the storm hit. Not the kind that comes with thunder, the kind that hums beneath your bones, that warps time and bends light, the kind only the oldest travelers speak of, and even then, only in whispers. The cosmic maelstrom. The ship shook like it wanted to tear itself apart. Love screamed once, then laughed. Of course she laughed. I held the controls, gritting my teeth, knowing full well Stormbreaker might split us into atoms if we misjudged the pull. But I didn't let go, because storms, I know, we rode it through gravity spirals, rivers of anti-light and clouds of memory mist. It showed me things, faces I'd buried, moments I hadn't thought of in years. Jane's first laugh, Loki's last smirk, my mother's lullabies, my father's silence. I saw Asgard fall again, heard the screaming, felt the fire on my face. But then, I saw her, Love, standing at the helm with her hands out, commanding the storm like it was her playground. And the fear turned to calm. We made it out, barely, but in one piece, mostly. The maelstrom had spat us out near a forgotten moon. We landed hard, too hard. The ship wouldn't fly for days, so we waited, built a fire, a real one, cooked whatever we could find, roasted it over the flame. Didn't talk much. We didn't need to. That night she asked me something I hadn't prepared for. Do you think the storm remembers you? I paused, then smiled. I think it is me. She nodded, as if that made perfect sense. In the morning, I carved a message into the ship's side. Through storms we remember who we are. By the time the engine groaned back to life, I felt new, not in body, in spirit, like something inside me had finally stopped running. Or maybe had simply come home. It started with a feeling, a low pulse, a tug beneath the ribs, like the Bifrost winding up inside my chest. But it wasn't magic. It was memory, and something, calling. Love was asleep, curled up under a blanket that used to be my cape. Stormbreaker hummed quietly on the floor beside her, and I was staring at the stars. When I heard it, a voice. His voice. Odin. Not loud, not clear, just present, like an old echo walking across the surface of my thoughts. You've come far, my son. I closed my eyes, didn't speak, didn't breathe, just listened. He wasn't giving orders, wasn't judging, just remembering with me. The fields, the throne, the arguments, the silence between father and son when pride got in the way of love. And the moment he let go, I was too hard on you, he said. and I almost laughed. Almost, but the ache was still too fresh. Even after everything, there were wounds only time dared touch. I told him I forgave him, and I meant it. Not just because I'd grown, but because I understood now what it means to carry a crown, to be looked at like a symbol when all you want is to rest. Odin said one more thing before his voice faded. It's not your power that makes her safe. It's your presence. I looked at love, sleeping, dreaming, and I felt the truth of it settle like thunder in my chest. I hadn't just found a purpose. I'd found someone to share it with. And for the first time in centuries, that was enough. When I woke in the morning, the stars had shifted. We were closer to Earth now. Not physically, emotionally, spiritually. I could feel the tug again. Not from Odin, from Jane. Her voice, faint but familiar, calling through the veil. I knew then it was time to Earth hadn't changed, but I had. The sky looked smaller, the buildings taller, the air heavier. Not because it was denser, because it carried memory. We landed quietly. No fireworks, no symbols painted across the clouds, just a god and a girl walking down a dirt road toward a coastline that once held fragments of new Asgard. The village was larger now. Rebuilt, peaceful. Children ran along the docks. Merchants called out in 5 languages. Someone was roasting something that smelled suspiciously like goat. Valkyrie was waiting. She smiled when she saw us, then punched me in the shoulder. I knew you'd show up again when things were too peaceful. I grinned. I'm consistent. Love ran off to join the others. She didn't need my shadow anymore. Not in that moment. She was safe, free, home. Valkyrie and I walked along the cliffs. No war to plan, no losses to mourn, just time. She told me about the changes, how she negotiated with governments, protected trade routes, fought a troll uprising in Sweden. The usual. I told her about the storm, about the moon, about the whispers. She listened. Didn't judge, didn't offer solutions, just listened. Sometimes that's all we need. Later that night, I stood at the edge of the water. The wind off the sea was cold, but it carried something softer. A voice. Not Odin this time. Not Loki. Jane. I couldn't hear her words, but I felt her presence. She was proud, not of what I had done, of who I had become. I whispered into the tide. Thank you. Love came up behind me, hand in mine. Are we staying? For a while. Then we'll need goats. I laughed. I didn't have a throne, or a kingdom, or even a proper title anymore. But in that moment, under the stars, with the sea stretching out forever, I had something better. Peace doesn't shout. It doesn't announce itself with horns or lightning. It arrives like morning mist, soft, unassuming, and you don't realize you're in it until you're breathing without armor. The days blurred together, simple days. Love fed the goats. I fixed roofs. Valkyrie held council meetings under open skies. No battles, no bloodshed, just breath. I taught some of the village kids how to wield a sword, not to fight, to understand balance, discipline, where their fear ends and their confidence begins. They weren't warriors, not yet, but they could be whatever they chose. Love helped them paint the practice shields, bright colors, suns, stars. One had a tiny drawing of Stormbreaker on it, but with bunny ears. I didn't ask. Some nights I sat on the shore alone, just me and the wind. I used to dread silence, used to think it meant loneliness. Now, I found it sacred. I thought about everything, about Hela, about Gore, about the girl with the red hands and the sad eyes, Wanda, about Vision, Nat, Tony, about the things we lose when we become legends, and the things we still hold on to. One morning I found Love staring at the sunrise, serious. She asked, "Do you think the gods get tired of being gods?" I paused, then said, "Yes, but the good ones, they keep going anyway." She nodded, didn't say anything else. Later that week, a storm rolled in. Not from me, a real one. Thunder without anger. Rain that fed instead of drowned. I let it wash over me, felt it trickle through my fingers, and for once, I didn't feel like I had to be in control of it. I started writing again, not on stone walls or scrolls, on pages and pages of things I never said. To my father, to Loki, to Jane, to myself, not to mourn, to remember, to honor. Sometimes I still heard Odin's voice, sometimes Frigga's, but lately, more often, I heard my own, clear, steady, without shame. The stars blinked in the sky like they knew something I didn't. Even after all this time, all the realms, all the battles, I still found myself staring up, wondering what else was out there. Love joined me. She lay beside me on the grass, arms behind her head, eyes scanning constellations. She asked, "Do you think we'll ever meet someone from another universe?" I smiled. "Probably, and they'll probably try to kill us." She laughed. "Good. Sounds fun." There was something unshakable in her. Not arrogance, not fearlessness, a kind of knowing, like she remembered what it meant to be made of eternity. And maybe she did. That night, something changed. It started with a sound, soft, high-pitched, a shimmer in the silence. Not wind, not thunder, a frequency I hadn't heard in decades, a distress signal. It pulsed again, ancient tech, buried signal bands, coordinates that hadn't been used since the old days, since the Guardians. I found Stormbreaker in the dark. It was humming, tugging me toward the stars. I didn't want to go, but I knew I had to. That call, it wasn't just noise. It was familiar, too familiar. I told Love the next morning. She didn't argue, just packed her things. No fear, no hesitation, only a quiet, "Okay." Valkyrie met us at the ship. "You're not gonna explain anything first, are you?" I shrugged. "Would you believe me if I did?" She smirked. "Nope." We left before noon, lifted off through golden clouds, new Asgard shrinking behind us, but not away from us. We weren't leaving, just following a thread. The coordinates pulled us toward a deep sector, unmapped, unwelcoming, no star charts, no name. And then, the signal stopped. Not because we lost it, because something answered it. When it answered, it didn't speak in words. It was a pulse, a low hum that resonated in my chest before I even heard it in my ears. Stormbreaker responded immediately, not with light, but with gravity, pulling, leading. Love stared out the window of the ship, wide-eyed. "What is that?" I didn't know. And that was the problem. We descended into a region of space that didn't feel like space. It felt old, still, not dead, but waiting. An orbiting ring of derelict moons encircled a hollow world. Something ancient had been here, something that still breathed beneath the surface. We landed on black stone. The stars above us dimmed the moment we stepped out. No wind, No sound. Just silence so complete. It felt like we were walking inside a thought. At the center of the ruin was a spire. Smooth, metallic, cracked. At its peak, a glowing orb hovered, slowly turning. That was the source. The beacon. When I reached for it, Stormbreaker vibrated, but not in warning, in recognition. I touched the orb, and the world changed. Not physically, but in my mind, in the space where memory and magic blur. I was standing in the ruins of Asgard, but it was different, newer, brighter, untouched, then darker, then burning, then gone. Visions came in flashes, a multiversal weave, threads of lives I had never lived. Versions of myself, some kind, some cruel, when wearing armor made of screams. Another, nothing but lightning, walking alone forever. And then, a child, in all of them. One constant, her, love. I staggered back, the beacon dimmed, and I knew this place wasn't showing me possibilities. It was showing me warnings. I looked at her. She looked back. I saw me. I said. She nodded. I saw you too. She didn't ask what it meant. She didn't need to. She knew what I knew. Something was coming. Something bigger than gods. Older than Gore. Stronger than Thanos. And it was connected to her. To us. The ship shook as we lifted off. The beacon behind us cracked once. Then again. Then it shattered. No explosion. Just stillness. Like its purpose was complete. And now, its message was ours to carry. We didn't speak much on the flight back. Not because there was nothing to say, but because we both felt it. The weight of what we had seen. The truth that hadn't been spoken aloud. Love sat beside me, legs crossed, eyes closed, not asleep, listening not to the hum of the ship, but to something deeper, like she could still hear the remnants of the beacon, or the silence that had followed it. I asked her what she felt. She said, "It's not a warning, it's a door." The stars outside twisted, stretched, then came back into place, but none of it looked familiar. The galaxy we returned to wasn't the one we left. Everything looked the same, but felt wrong, slightly off. Colors too sharp, distances too long, moons where there shouldn't be any. I checked our course logs. Same coordinates, different reality. The beacon hadn't just shown us warnings. It had sent us somewhere, somewhen. Stormbreaker thrummed, a low, concerned rhythm. It didn't like this place. Neither did I. We landed on a drifting asteroid to reorient, map our location, check the stars, and that's when we saw it. A tear in the sky. Not a rift. A scar. A jagged rip in space. Leaking shadow and light in equal measure. Like reality had tried to heal, and failed. Love stepped toward it, but I stopped her. I didn't need to be told what it was. I could feel it. A hole in the multiverse. Not a crack. An invitation. Voices leaked through. Mine. Hers. Screams. Whispers. And one word repeated, over and over. Balance. I turned to her. If we step through, we may not come back. She looked at me and said, then we stepped together. We gripped hands. Stormbreaker glowed. The tear opened wider, and we walked through. Crossing into another reality doesn't feel like falling. It feels like being unmade, and then pieced back together, but differently. A shift so quiet, you only realize it happened when the silence won't leave your ears. The sky was gray, not storm gray, colorless, Clouds that didn't move, air that didn't taste like anything at all, like the world had forgotten how to be. We stepped onto ground that didn't feel real. It held our weight, but not our presence. No scent, no warmth. The land simply existed. Barely. Love looked up. No thunder, she said. I nodded. No wind. No storms. No pulse in the sky. Nothing that moved without being told. We walked through a valley of glass trees. They didn't rustle, didn't bend, just stood waiting. And then we saw them. Figures. Dozens. Standing still as statues across a broken plain. Eyes open, no breath. Like puppets waiting for strings that would never come. I stepped closer to one. A woman. Tall. Wearing armor like mine. Her face looked familiar, but not from this life. And then I realized, it was me. One of me. Another Thor. Frozen in time. Drained of thunder. Of choice. The others were the same. Not dead. Not alive. Held in place like memories sealed inside ice. Love shivered. It's a cage, she whispered. But who built it? Stormbreaker was silent. And that's when I knew. We weren't meant to fix anything here. We were meant to see, to understand what happens when gods forget who they are. When power exists without will. A place of versions, where every possibility came to rest, once it lost the will to become real. She reached out and touched the arm of the statue that wore my fate. The stone cracked beneath her fingers. A whisper escaped its lips. Not a breath, a name. Mine. And then, the world began to When the statues cracked, they didn't fall. They trembled. Just slightly. A ripple through the stone. A flicker in their stillness. Like something was trying to remember how to move. Love stepped back. I didn't mean to. I shook my head. You didn't break anything. You woke it. The world shuddered. Low and long. Not like thunder. Like breath. The sound of a god trying to inhale for the first time in centuries. I looked around. Watched crack spiderweb across the motionless figures. Pieces falling away. Not flesh beneath. Not bone, but light. Swirling. Contained. Like energy that had forgotten what it meant to belong to something. Then came the voice. It didn't echo. It existed everywhere at once. Low. Measured. And tired. So, one still walks. I raised Stormbreaker. Didn't speak. Didn't need to. The voice already knew me. Knew us. You are not from here, it said. You carry your storm inside. Uncut. Undiluted. That is rare. Love gripped my hand tighter. I asked it, what is this place? A pause. Then, the realm of abandoned potential. Every Thor who faltered. Every god who grew afraid of what they could become. They end here. And I told it the truth. I didn't mean to. But now that I'm here, I think I know why I've survived. The storm around me began to stir. Not from fear. From conviction. I stepped forward. Among the frozen. I've doubted. I've failed. I've lost everything. More than once. But I never stopped choosing. And that's what makes a god. The statues began to glow. Not crumble. Not rise. Just shine. Light breaking through their cracks. As if they were finally listening to something they had forgotten how to hear. Stormbreaker pulsed once. And I heard Jane's voice. Not in my ear. In my core. Be who you are today. Love looked up at me. Is this the end? I shook my head. This is the storm waking. I could feel it building. Not outside me, within. The storm, the one I thought I had mastered, the one I thought I had lost. It hadn't left me. It had been waiting. The light from the cracked statues intensified. Each version of me, those who had once turned away, those who surrendered to doubt, they began to stir. Not as warriors, as energy, as pieces of a whole. Love stood at my side, glowing faintly in the reflection. She didn't look afraid. She looked ready. The voice returned, less distant this time. You carry not just your own power, Thor. You carry the will of every version of yourself that chose to rise again. And that's when I understood. This place wasn't just a graveyard. It was a forge. Not of weapons, of identity, of purpose, of self. The ground began to shake. Stormbreaker lifted on its own, drawn upward by a pull deeper than gravity. The crack in the sky above us flared, light pouring through like a second dawn. And I felt every spark in my blood answer it. For the first time in my long life, I felt whole. I turned to love. You feel that? She nodded. It's like everything's finally saying yes. Then came the wind, real wind. Not from the rift, from me, whipping in a cyclone around us, lifting stones, lighting the sky. Stormbreaker pulsed like a heart, and I raised it. Lightning cracked, not in fear, not in destruction, but in reignition. The kind of energy that brings things to life, not ends them. The other Thors, the ones sealed in stone, they didn't rise, they didn't fight, they became part of the storm. Their light folded into mine, their weight gone, their strength shared. I wasn't alone, not anymore, not ever again. I looked to love. She stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with cosmic reflection, and in her I saw something more than just eternity's spark. I saw future, a new kind of thunder. We rose through the light, not flying, becoming. Our bodies shimmered as we stepped into the rift, not as invaders, not as echoes, but as something the multiverse hadn't known it needed. Storm and spark, love and thunder. The world on the other side was fractured, but not broken, held together by belief, by the last remnants of gods who had once shaped entire galaxies with a whisper. Their voices called out, some familiar, some foreign, all watching, waiting, not for a savior, but for proof that gods could evolve, that power didn't have to mean dominance, that legacy could mean more than myth. Love touched the ground first. The moment her foot met the surface, color returned to the air. The sky rippled with light, and the ground bloomed beneath her feet. Whatever she was now, she wasn't just a child. She wasn't just my daughter. She was rift-born, made of eternity, guided by love, forged through storm. And I was no longer just the god of thunder. I was her shield, her history, her beginning. We didn't fight what came next, not with weapons, with presence, with power that hummed rather than shouted. The rift pulsed again, its scarred edges softening, and I heard one final voice, Frigga, clearer than before. Now do you understand, my son? And I did. It wasn't about being worthy. It never had been. It was about choosing, again and again, to show up, to lift, to love, to lead, even when the crown didn't fit, even when the lightning hid, even when the gods fell silent. Stormbreaker shifted in my hand, not heavy, not a burden, just right. I looked at the girl beside me, at the stars bending in recognition, and I said, let's go home. Home wasn't where we left from. It was where we arrived, new, whole, and changed. The rift behind us didn't slam shut. It folded in on itself, quietly, purposefully, like a page being turned in a book that knew it had more to say, but not to us. The sky above shimmered again, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to lift my hammer to it. I just watched it close, watched the universe blink, and then exhale. New Asgard came into view. Not a kingdom anymore. Not quite a refuge. Something in between. A place that had learned to carry grief and joy in equal measure. As we landed, the ship let out a low hum. Not mechanical, more like a sigh. Even metal remembers. Love stepped off first. She didn't run, didn't float. She walked, calm, confident, like someone who knew exactly who she was now. The villagers gathered, not to kneel, not to worship, just to witness. They looked at her, then at me, and in their eyes I didn't see awe, I saw recognition. We weren't gods to them anymore. We were home. Valkyrie met us at the old path. She didn't say anything at first, just nodded. Then you missed 2 goat births, and a frost giant diplomat, who wouldn't stop crying. I grinned. Did you give him a hug? She rolled her eyes. Of course not. I gave him beer. We stayed. Not forever. Just long enough. Long enough to feel soil beneath our feet, to remember what it meant to grow things, instead of destroy them. I helped rebuild the Eastern Watchtower. Love taught the local kids how to shoot lightning out of their fingers. Well, at least one of them managed it. The goats ran wild. They always do. Some nights I'd walk the cliffs alone, Stormbreaker resting on my shoulder, the sea churning below like it was waiting to be called. But I wouldn't call it, not unless I needed it. Because I finally understood, power doesn't need to shout. Sometimes, it's just knowing you can. Jane's voice would visit me in the wind. Not often, just enough. Still learning, she'd whisper, and I'd smile. Always. I built a bench beneath the tree where Frigga once watched me train, carved their names into the wood, all of them. My family, my friends, my failures. Not to mourn them, to carry them. One morning Love brought me a book. Blank pages, leather-bound. You should write it all down, she said, before it fades. So I did. Every word, every choice, every storm. If you find that book, know that it isn't a story about gods. Not really. It's a story about what comes after the hammer, after the crown, after the final lightning strike. It's about peace, and how it doesn't come with silence. It comes with stillness, with intention, with presence. So if you ask me now, who are you? I won't list my titles. I won't raise my weapon. I'll sit with you, and I'll say, I am Thor Odinson. I am the storm. I am the silence after the roar. I am the past forgiven, the present held, and the future shared. I am a father, a son, a wanderer, a guardian, and I am never alone again.